That's good enough. All right, let's hear about the Germans.
So, this is on Tacitus's book, or
Tacitus.
Tacitus, because Romans didn't have a soft C like we do.
There you go.
So, Tacitus's
Tacitus's.
Germania. And I don't have the source book, so I don't know what the extract was. I just read the entire Germania.
You did.
Yeah.
And you don't have the questions either.
No. I'm going to borrow Clayton's book, because the presentation said, do a presentation analysis on the source. And your 2-page
So
paper...
now, are you going into law?
No.
Oh, okay.
Going into teaching. And it says your 2-page paper
Well, I mean,
will be
seems
on
like
the
you're
questions.
You're becoming a lawyer on the assignment.
I looked at it to see if I was...
You read Tacitus's entire work on Germania.
what Oxford has of it translated into English anyway.
Oh, so you read it in English.
I did read it in English. I don't speak all of Latin.
All right.
So,
Let's hear about it.
What is Germania?
What is it?
Well, it's a region and a book. The book was written in about 98 AD by this fellow, Tacitus. Contains almost all Roman knowledge up to that point of the German people. Includes little summaries about a bunch of different tribes. That's basically what the second half of it is going into individual tribes and what distincts them from the rest of the Germans. Covers religious practices, the role of women in German life, their style of ruling and warfare, and just kind of a sum-all, this is the German people book. And it forms the basis of Roman-German interaction from the Roman side for the next 400 years, because the Romans never bother to update their information. Just every time they're dealing with Germans, they're like, all right, this is what Tacitus wrote about Germans, so this is how Germans have to work.
And he didn't put that they loved David Hasselhoff.
He did not put that they loved David Hasselhoff in there.
David Hasselhoff wasn't yet alive.
No.
Otherwise he would have.
Most likely, he would have been included had David Hasselhoff been alive in 98 AD.
Well, he's pretty old, but not that old.
The style of leadership for the Germans, kings are hereditary. The kingship, if your dad was king, you're the firstborn son, you're going to be king. Generals, however, are decided by merit. There's not enough of a political infrastructure to be appointed a general for political reasons. They just want the people who are good at fighting. You
probably should also be good at leading.
They have a different style of leadership compared to the Romans in general. Kings and generals are expected to lead from the front and inspire through example rather than an innate authority. Even if you're the king, I don't have to listen to you unless you're good at talking. And even if you're the general, I don't have to follow your orders unless you're good at fighting. A general was the first person to fight and the last one out, like the giant guy in Gladiator who's just surrounded by 4 people at the beginning of that opening fight scene. He was probably the leader of that army because that's just kind of how Germans pick their generals. You're the biggest and the strongest and you're the best at fighting. Yeah, we'll follow you to a fight. A chief had to convince the people of his ideas through persuasion. So if he's like, hey, we're going to be moving this summer and no one likes what he's saying, they'll just shout him down and not listen to anything he says, even if he does know what's best. And if they liked you, every meeting that they had, everyone came armed. You brought your weapons with you everywhere. And so if they liked what you were saying, they smashed their javelins on their shields, because there was no greater sign of respect, honor, or agreement than the showing of arms. And I guess if they really didn't like you, they had a bunch of weapons to disagree with you with. Women in Germania.
Ladies.
Tacitus found it strange that they were listened to, even to the point of ignoring a man's idea if a woman said something different in a small affair. So a husband would take his wife's advice into higher consideration than his friends in many cases. And he thought that was weird. The Germans believed women had a divine insight or intuition that couldn't be explained by anything else and that men didn't have access to. Women were brought along to battlefields where they supplied all of the food, and if you were wounded in battle, you just walked back to your wife, who was within shouting distance, is the quote, and she would take care of you. If a battle was going poorly, the women would complain that they would be enslaved to inspire the soldiers, and on a few occasions, they took up arms as well. Marcus Aurelius noted that on several battlefields where he completely won, that there were many women among the dead Germans as well as men. But the Germans also didn't really care if they were enslaved so much, the German men, but if their women or children were threatened by slavery, that was like a big no-no to them and made them fight even harder.
There you go.
Tacitus also thought it was weird that they were monogamous. Adultery was very heavily frowned upon in German society. If you were caught having an affair, whether you're the man or the woman, you're shaved and kicked out of the community. Like you're shaved bald, not everywhere. Just they cut the hair off your head and you're pretty much kicked out, and that's a sign of we don't like this person. And they stay with their partners for pretty much their entire life. But in the case of adultery, you're kicked out, or a death, you don't remarry in German culture unless, the only exception to this is if you're a king who needs an heir, you would remarry, or you would have multiple wives, but that's pretty much the only situation that it's ever accepted in. And then the last half of the book, Tacitus is going over every tribe the Romans have encountered, and giving them, like, what separates them from each other. He goes into details that are, reach to tribes up in the Baltic regions, which I found really surprising, that, even though there's all of this Germany that the Romans never really pushed past, they knew about things that were happening on the far side of it. An example of this is he talks about a tribe that gathers amber in the ocean, something that doesn't occur along the northern coastline of Germany today at all. You have to go as far north as Latvia, which isn't even on this map. It's just past where the top of the map is. So there's a typo. Shows how far Romans went into Germania and who they interacted with on the way. He talks about how the people up there didn't really care about amber at all until Romans showed up and started buying it. Or they traded it to people who traded it to the Romans, and then that was all they did, because they were just, like, living in mud huts, hitting each other with sticks before they found out they had something valuable there.
Each other with sticks.
Yeah. They didn't have any iron. Tacitus notes that they fought with clubs, didn't wear any armor, didn't have any horses, didn't farm. They just kind of sat around in the mud. He talks about how whenever they weren't fighting, any of the warriors, when they weren't at war, were the laziest people he had ever seen, because they didn't like farming. They just liked, if they weren't fighting, they were just laying around at home. That was it. And that the only thing that kept them going was the constant infighting between all the tribes, because if they lost everything, they had no motivation to earn it back themselves, but they were perfectly willing to go and take it from someone else. And that is Tacitus on the Germans.
Let me ask you a question.
Yes.
Do you think that his description is accurate? What do you think the purpose of his description is? Let's put it that way. Why do you think he's giving us a description of Germans?
I would say his description is to give a highlight of the Roman Empire, because he kind of looks down on a lot of the things that we today would say are kind of good things that the Germans have going, like the egalitarian system of, hey, you actually listen to your wife. And he's like, that's a horrible idea. Why would they do something like that? And it's also the 98 AD is near not the start, but it's still the beginnings of the Roman Empire. The empire is still young compared to the history of the Republic, so he's comparing the empire to the barbarians to the north and saying, like, look at these lazy people, they don't farm anything, their armies are just, they come whenever they come, instead of the great legions that we have that are professional soldiers, and we have this great farming infrastructure. Our women are kept way back under lock and key rather than brought along to the battlefields. He also talks about how they have the uncivilized ideas of you shouldn't have sex before you're 20. So I think he's trying to highlight how great the culture of the Romans are throughout most of it by comparing it to the backwoods barbarians.
So do you think this was part of his purpose was a justification of conquering them?
Yeah.
Because they are not
Yeah.
civilized. They're not really, I don't know if you'd say they aren't humans, but they certainly are not.
They're not Romans.
Certainly not Romans.
Right.
And they're not even worthy adversaries.
Right. Like,
He's not sort of doesn't appear to be describing them as sort of worthy opponents.
no, he doesn't describe them in a positive manner. So I would say, yeah, you could use this book as a justification of conquering them and bringing them into the glory of the Roman Empire. Like you're helping them. Like you're conquering them to raise them up and help them out.
Yeah, so actually us taking them over and bringing our Roman order and Roman culture is going to help out the it's going to help out the Germans.
It's charity
The
work.
Germans need our help
Yeah.
because they do love David Hasselhoff. So we have to educate them.
Right.
Speaking of Knight Rider, well, we weren't just now, but we were earlier. How about other questions? I would like some other. How about another meaningful question from someone about Tacitus?
This is just a comment. They kind of view the barbarians or they call them barbarians, but they view the Germans as kind of like hillbillies and rednecks, right?
Yeah. Yeah. They're the backwoods hicks who are just, they don't even farm. Like, what are they doing with their lives?
Around what year was this? Like that you wrote this?
98 AD. So, turn of the century. Just
And
a
so,
few
you know,
centuries
it's
ago.
going to be about another 50, 60, or more like 60 years. They're going to have increasing problems with the Germans.
Mm-hmm.
So you think about that let's say in the next 60, 50, 60 years, the Germans are increasingly a problem on the battlefield for the Romans. But yet, this is their impression of the Germans.
Right.
So if the Germans are not great warriors, really, and if the Germans are lazy bums, or however they're described,
Mm-hmm.
yet the Romans can't seem to beat them.
Yeah,
They control them.
it'd be like if the United States tried to invade a country today using information from the 1950s.
Yeah.
Like, oh, these guys have one railroad in their entire country. This will be a cakewalk. And then we get there and it's completely different because they never update what they use when they're interacting. Like even when I was talking about the Gothic invasions of Italy in like 480, they're still referencing this book, trying to understand the interactions that they have with Theoderic and all of them.
But it's but also it'd be humiliating, right?
Yes.
To say that we are so great, we have such a great civilization, such a great army, such a great military, yet we can't seem to beat these guys or control them. They keep coming back, they keep fighting, they defeat us in battle. Even though they don't have the great weapons that we have, they don't have the great discipline that we have, they don't have the great organization that we have. I think it would make I think it would make people question, maybe we're not as powerful or great as we think we are.
Yeah, you could probably compare it to Vietnam for America. We're just losing to nobodies out in the forest somewhere. Completely underestimating the opponent because of that, and then there being a crisis of homeland support for any conflict and doubt in the nation afterwards because of that.
Actually, the whole loss behind Vietnam was political. The military actually did not lose.
Okay.
I do have a question, though. Did Tacitus say anything about the Ghost Warriors?
No, not in what I read did he say anything about Ghost Warriors.
No, that's just what they were called.
All right. If there aren't any others, you just leave it there.
Okay.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot. Overall, I think very good job. Very good job. Very good job. Next source with Christian. Okay.
So, mine was basically the Solic Law, and Solic Law was a codification of rules governing behavior within lands by the how do you pronounce that word?
Frankish people.
Well, up here, Solic. Okay, it's a branch of Frankish people. And the Solic Law took place under the reign of Clovis. Clovis reigned from 481 through 511, and the Solic Law shows us how Frankish society was changing as a consequence of the rise of a king whose authority gave legitimacy to the code. So what I did was just, because the chapter or the source listed a good amount of the laws, in the source it said that the fines were to reduce acts of private revenge and family feuds. And that's a key part to the laws. This right here, I believe you pronounce it denarii. Denarii, right? Denarii.
Yeah.
It's a silver coin, so one denarii is like $3 for us today. For some laws, if you committed a crime, you would have to pay a solidus, which is a gold coin, so it's worth more. But
so let's go back to that just for a second. It gets to be tricky to try to assign value of coinage or money to today. A denarii technically had been a day's pay. So if you would even take minimum wage of today, which I don't know, like
7.25.
All right. So let's say $10 an hour somebody's making. So that'd be $80. Let's say $70 to $80 is probably because a lot of people make more than $7.80 a day, $7.25 a day, so an hour. So in other words, it's roughly a day's pay. So that's a lot. I mean, it's actually a lot. If you were fined 30 of that would be like a month's wages.
Well, we're about to see some of the laws. I just bolded some of the ones that were more important than the others. But for example, if a man has been summoned to court in accordance with the king's law and does not come, and if a lawful excuse has not detained him, he shall be liable to pay 600.
Now, maybe I could use this on, let's say, people that don't show up to give their presentation on the day that they're assigned to give their presentation. They shall be liable to pay 600 denarii, so that'd be 600 days' wages. So that's almost 2 years' wages. Even at minimum wage, I'm doing pretty well on that one.
Yeah, well.
I mean, it's just a thought. I'm not saying, but that it just seems like even in medieval times, they recognized that if you had been summoned and you didn't show, there was a penalty.
Yeah.
All right, go ahead. 600 denarii. 600 days' wages.
It's a lot. I'm assuming it's a lot for that time.
That's a lot for anybody. I mean, 600 days' wages.
Yeah.
Almost 2 years.
If a man is occupied in the king's service, he cannot be summoned to court, which obviously makes sense. If he's busy doing something for the king, can't be like, oh, I choose him, I appoint him, or I summon him, and obviously he's off doing something. If 3 men take a free girl from her house or workroom, the 3 shall be liable to pay 1,200 denarii, which I don't know in the source. It never really mentioned what a free girl was or a free man was. I'm assuming it's just one of the.
Well, they had, there was slavery.
Right.
There were also people who were, we might call them like indentured servants or serfs. People were kind of tied by obligation to land or to a position. So if somebody who's free, that means that they are in a different social situation than somebody who's a slave or someone who's bound. I mean, bound by obligation. So this means, you're taking a girl who's from a family that's got land, wealthy, and you're taking out. Doesn't say where they're taking her or what they're doing, but I guess
right.
We can perhaps use our imagination.
That's right. Yep. He who attacks on the road a betrothed girl with her bridal party being led to her husband forcefully has intercourse with her shall be liable to pay 8,000 denarii.
Okay, so this is interesting. You see, number 1 is just someone who's free girl, right? 1,200. If the one who's taken was placed under the king's protection, take a look, 2,500 denarii. So, it more than doubles.
Right.
Right? And now here's a woman who's betrothed. So she's engaged, although engaged more seriously than we use the word engaged. I mean, betrothed means you're basically legally bound together even though you're not formally married yet. So, I mean, it's a little different than being engaged, I think, in our culture. Right? Somebody can be engaged and kind of break it, and there's no legal ramifications, usually. And joins herself to marriage should be liable for 2,500 denarii to the family or guardian. Now you attack on the road a betrothed girl with her bridal party being led to her husband. So, you're waiting until the last minute now, and you basically go out, you're kidnapping her. I mean, all these are kidnapping.
Yeah.
And I assume that it's leading to perhaps rape, or certainly that's what's implied. In some cases, it's actually, in this case, spelled out.
Yeah.
Forcibly has intercourse with her. 8,000 denarii.
Extremely polite way of putting it.
8,000 denarii. Okay, go ahead.
Concerning homicide, or the man who takes another man's wife while her husband still lives, he who kills a free man or takes another man's wife shall be liable to pay 8,000. He who rapes a free girl and it is proved against him shall be liable to pay 2,500. And then basically just like certain parts I didn't bold all of it because it's just I saw how much they would have to pay, as I found that pretty interesting throughout the laws that
secretly
they would have to.
When they both consent, right?
Yeah.
So this is they're sneaking around.
Round.
Free girl. Okay, 1,800 denarii. So I think since we have, and it is interesting to have. Did you find any of them that had anything besides monetary fines? Like putting somebody to death or
no.
Physically.
Which is why I found it so interesting, because a bunch of the like you could kill a pregnant woman and you would have to pay not a denarii but a solidus. You would have to pay a certain amount. So it's just basically you could do anything you really wanted as long as you could pay the amount. But I'm sure no one really could afford the amount that was being fined on them. So, I mean, I wouldn't try and do any.
I like
any
number 2 there.
Yeah.
Just tried to shoot the guy with the poison arrow.
Yeah. So.
But you missed. I mean, I missed.
Yeah. So.
I got to pay $2,500 denarii. So next time I do it, I'm not going to miss.
Wish me luck. No, I'm just kidding.
Makes his brain show.
Yeah.
It's more expensive to miss a guy with a poisoned arrow than it is to crack his skull open.
Exactly. Like some of these laws is just pretty interesting. Like if you fail at murdering somebody, you're gonna get fined. Like
Yeah.
I do
like that. Now, if I strike the guy in the head and his brain didn't show, I wonder how much I got to pay. Go over whack him in the head, but none of the brain showed. So
Yeah, probably
that's
700.
pay $650.
He accuses before the king an innocent man who is absent shall be liable to pay 2,500 denarii.
Yeah.
It just continues on.
You know what? One thing I do find interesting in all, like this kind of a law and in ancient laws, and theoretically it used to be this way in the United States, but I guess not anymore, that if you accuse somebody of something, and if that is not true, there were heavy penalties for the person. In fact, the ancient Babylonian laws, if you accuse somebody of murder, let's say, and later on is found the guy didn't do the murder, the person who does the accusing is the one who is found guilty of murder, put to death. This is to cut down on false accusations. All right, go ahead. Touches the hand.
Yeah. So women actually had some laws. Well, yeah, they had some laws that protected them. If you touched a woman, basically, if that woman wasn't yours, or if you attempted to touch her in any shape or form, you were fined.
If you touched her finger.
Yes. So just don't touch the ladies. Like, don't touch the free women.
600 denarii.
Stay in a little room. Buddy.
Yeah.
Now wait a minute, go back one, will you?
I think about
Below the elbow.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. If he touches
Just
her
don't
above
touch her.
the elbow, then the last one we're not going to highlight, but yeah.
highlight.
Yeah. It's.
All right, go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah. Just.
Why are they so specific on that?
Well, they're very
Hey, I guess it's
Gotta be
just.
Probably having to close this.
All right, go ahead. Keep going.
on killing children and
Boy,
women.
less than 12.
Yep. Less than 12, then you had to pay 4,000. If he who strikes a pregnant woman and is proved against him, well, I guess it wasn't killed, but if you proved against, it is proved against him, then he has to pay 28,000 denarii. If a
Cut
boy,
the hair of a long-haired free boy without the consent of his relatives. Cut his hair.
that's right.
1,800
I
denarii.
need to make sure you want me to cut your son's hair.
yeah,
Can you sign this for me?
Yeah.
No, I can't.
Sign
The
the
Germans
liability
like
form.
long hair.
If a boy under 12 commits an offense, a fine will not be required of him.
that's right. So it's like
So
you
it's
have.
an age. It's
So
an
if you
age,
can do you can do a certain act like
under 12.
under
So
12. if you're
basically, I got to get a
10 years
gang
old.
of kids that are under 12 and do whatever I want.
Yeah, if you're a leader of them. I mean,
Lord of the Flies.
Also, big, like, I can see some, like, dudes walking up and dog put him on the head, and it's like, that 12-year-old's done.
if he cuts the hand and the hand remain hanging there, he should be liable to pay 2,500.
If you gouge out the eye or cut off an ear or nose, maim the hand, or if he cuts the hand and remains hanging, you see, to cut it all the way off.
You just got chopped.
Yeah.
So it's less.
He who cuts another man's tongue and that he is not able to speak shall be liable to pay 4,000.
Okay, cutting out his tongue.
Yep. Concerning abusive terms, he who claims that someone else is covered in dung shall be liable to pay 120 denarii.
He who claims that someone else is covered in dung.
Yes, sir.
Well, hold on. So, if I walk up and say, you're full of crap, I suddenly have to pay all of that.
Well,
He who calls a free
That
man
is
or
very
woman
specific. Why are
prostitute.
yes, a prostitute and cannot prove it shall be liable to pay
So
120.
there has to be, what you're saying is, if you make a charge against someone, you have to have some evidence.
Yes,
Other
sir.
than you
Yeah,
just
you
say
can't
they,
just
they did this.
What is
Wow.
a pederast? Is that like a
Learn that
pedophile?
right now.
Or what is that?
a what? Oh, I don't know if that's honestly the biggest reason why I didn't highlight that, because I don't know what a pederast was, and when I googled that, I was like, I don't.
Well,
know
that's
if
when
that's-
you
that's what it
engage in
is.
certain activity with people that are young.
Ah, okay. Well, that makes sense.
And often I think it refers to people of the same gender. All right?
On killing a free man, who kills a free Frank or other barbarian who lives by the Salic law, and it is proved against him, shall be liable to pay 8,000. If he does not conceal his crime, shall be liable to pay 8,000. So, yeah. He who kills a pregnant woman shall be liable to pay 600. Solidity?
Solidity, yeah.
Yeah, solidity.
It's a heavy fine.
Oh, that's a great one. It's a big one. So basically, as you can see, the other ones were all about if you committed a crime, you would have to pay a certain fee or a great fee. And this right here, it's sort of like how we have it today. It's like if someone dies and who claims the land, if a man dies and leaves no children, and if his father and mother survives him, this person shall succeed to the inheritance. If there is no father or mother, but he leaves a brother, they shall succeed to the inheritance. But concerning Salic land, no portion or inheritance is for a woman, but all the land belongs to members of the male sex who are brothers.
So you kind of see no children, then to your father or mother, no father or mother, your brother, no brother, then your aunt. The aunt of your mother, it's very specific.
Yep.
The sister of your mother. And then no portion inheritance for a woman, but all the land belongs to members of the male sex who are brothers.
That's right.
Interesting. So it would go to the aunt, but the aunt
Would have to.
would probably have sons or...
Yeah. Would have to kind of give it up.
So the land would sort of stay in the family.
Right. And
But it's interesting they choose the mother's sister, not the father's.
Yeah. It said if the mother didn't have any sisters, then it goes to the father's, I believe, brother or something like that.
Very specific to it.
Mm-hmm. And I wanted to see how much it would cost for us today, but you said it was like days wages.
I think
so
if you're taking like, okay, this piece of silver, then you take the weight of it today, it would be like $3 or $4.
right.
I think it would be worth more than that. I think this is going to underprice it
Right. Okay.
by quite a bit.
That makes
I
sense.
think you're better off saying a denare is basically a day's wage.
Days wage. Okay.
And so if you're charging somebody 600 denarii, it's basically like 2 years' wages, 4 years' wages. And
So 600 is like $40,000 at minimum wage.
yeah, let's say, I think that's a better
yeah.
way of
Okay.
trying. I mean, it's hard to do, but I think gives you a better idea of how much it is.
All right. And yeah, that was it.
All right, do we have any questions? Any questions? Now, okay, let's talk about a couple things before we go then. We still have a couple of minutes, I think.